Hello everyone, I am the Weather Dude. Welcome back, and today we are going to be talking about, yes, big news, our first tropical storm of the 2023 Atlantic hurricane season, coming in pretty much right on time here. It is like literally the second day of hurricane season on June 2nd. So yes, the storm name is Arlene. We're going to get into all of its, all about the storm, what kind of impacts it could have on any, like on the mainland United States or potentially in the Caribbean. We're going to be taking a look at all that in today's video. So of course, be sure to like and subscribe to get the best weather content, and we're just going to jump right into it here. So here is a storm. You can see like the cone. The National Hurricane Center actually did issue kind of like a special advisory, if you will, for the storm. So here is Arlene. You can see the center over like the eastern Gulf of Mexico, making its way to the south. And it's an odd direction for these kind of storms to be moving in, but yes, it is moving south. And you can see the tropical storm force winds in that green zone there. It's not a large zone. I mean, the winds. The Hurricane Center, the Hurricane Hunters, I should say, actually did just do a couple of plane routes in there. They did a couple separate flights into there. I believe one was this morning. I believe there was another one like last night. So they have been doing some investigating, and based on what they found, I was looking at this earlier, it really didn't surprise me that this was going to become named, because they did find some pretty strong winds in there. So we'll take a look at that as well. So here you can see the storm right now, 40-mile-an-hour winds, gusts to 50, and pressure of 1,002 millibars. That's another thing that really went down too, was the pressure. But as we move forward in time, you can see, well, we can do a depression, 35-mile-an-hour winds, then 30-mile-an-hour winds, and then continue to weaken from there. So in that special advisory, they didn't make any changes to the cone. This looks about the same as it did earlier this morning. So yeah, that's the latest cone there from the National Hurricane Center. We take a look at some of the rain. The heaviest rain will form or will fall over the Gulf of Mexico, but there will be about an inch or two of rain, maybe even a couple more inches than that near Miami. But across the southern part of Florida, you can see some showers and thunderstorms, some moisture thrown on shore by the system. Of course, there could be some stronger winds, maybe near the coastal locations. So, of course, be on the lookout for, some higher water levels. But the impacts to Florida really are going to be minimal from this. It's not going to cross Florida. It's going to kind of go south and basically come back up this way. Could even maybe hit that Gulf Stream. Maybe something else could happen to it. Again, we're going to take a look at what kind of development, what kind of impacts we could see here. But from Orlando to Tampa down to Miami, the Weather Prediction Center has put out a marginal risk for flash flooding over the next 3 days. You can see this is through Friday morning or this morning. This is through tomorrow morning. This is through Sunday morning. Pretty much going to be, again, with a mixture of like those daily thunderstorms and the moisture that's going to be influenced by this system. Of course, adding a little bit more precipitable water to the mix. So definitely be on the lookout for some flooding there in Florida. Tropical storm force winds, the small chance that there is, or the chance that there is, will be offshore here. Again, Florida, Cuba, the Yucatan, all going to be kind of spared from the strong winds. But could you see a gust to like 30, 35, higher than what you typically see in any of these locations? Yeah, of course, there will definitely be some stronger wind gusts. Of course, there's lower pressure throughout this entire zone. So, of course, that will definitely be a possibility, if not a likelihood. So you can see here, this was from an earlier run of the European model, but here you can see the low and then the rotation here. You can kind of see the stronger winds according to the Euro are actually on the west side, around 30 miles an hour or so, but of course it's gotten stronger since then, but this is also an earlier run of it. But one thing to note here, if we take a look at where the low is, or where we'll be in about a couple hours, so here's the low center right here. We take a look at the sea surface temperatures. We can enable the pressure right here. Yeah, take a look at where that low center is. It's sitting in about 82 degree waters. I mean, it's pretty much right over the Gulf Stream at this point. If you don't know, the Gulf Stream is kind of a current that runs like this, and it kind of goes up the coastline like that. That's why you always see like in the middle, I always talk about like the last like 3 years now. I guess my fourth actually hurricane season covering this. But I always say how like in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico is always like that little sweet spot that has like the warmest waters. Well, that's why, because the Gulf Stream kind of just meanders around in this area, so really allows for some warmer water to build up. But anyways, you can see the 82 degree water right there, and it's pretty much only going to get warmer as it moves south. So you can see 83, 84 even, and if it makes a right turn to go Gulf Stream, 84. But as we're going to get into here in a little bit, you'll see the wind shear will also be getting stronger. So even though the waters are going to be like in the low to mid 80s, which is very conducive for tropical development and even for a hurricane to develop in those kind of waters, there will be some wind shear that will be interfering with the system. So that's kind of why it's pretty much going to get to minimum tropical storm status, and that's it. But we also didn't think it could get to this status, so we're definitely going to take a look on it down the road. So you can see, there you go, there's a little speck right there in the middle of the Gulf. that I was talking about, but the man, the oceanic heat content is really getting going. I mean, it's already getting to very high levels in the Caribbean. Now, the sea surface temperature map, if you take a look at that, like we just showed you, the sea surface temperatures are, slightly above average. I would say even steadily, above average. I wouldn't say extremely, like it's not like we're on fire, but they're pretty warm, very warm. But this takes a look at below the surface, below the ocean surface. How is the heat down there? Because that's what a hurricane or a tropical storm really needs to get going. And the fact that these levels are already between 100 and 150 in some areas on the scale, all right, which is like pretty much at the highest or higher levels. And remember, June just started. Usually these kind of levels are something we would see like in August and September when the water really gets at its warmest, tropical activity gets at its highest. But yeah, it's pretty much already getting there now. So that's definitely something to be concerned about as well. You can see a little map here, the National Hurricane Center. You can kind of see where the low pressure is relative to the rest of the United States and the surrounding areas. So yeah, dropping pressure definitely was one of the things here. You can see like a little wave down here as well. So definitely a couple areas that we're watching, but you can see on the cyclonic vortices scale, you can kind of see where that is, and it's kind of circular, excuse me. So you can kind of see that the storm is kind of getting itself together a little bit the best it can. It does have a good amount of rotation. We're going to show that on the satellite as well. But you can definitely see where our low pressure system is at the moment. Let's actually take a look at this on a satellite. You can see the storm right here. I mean, you can see that there is definitely a lot of rotation. You might have saw this in the thumbnail, of course. You can definitely see that rotation area that I highlighted on there. You can see it right there, still going strong here. Actually, funny thing, when I started like making this video, I was gonna name it like Tropical Depression 2, but then I literally refreshed the page and it said Arlene. I was like, oh, okay. So there you go. There's your circulation right there. And you can definitely see, the clouds are definitely rotating. The storms, of course, are building as this time of day we start to get a little bit more heat in the atmosphere. All right, it's a little bit more conducive for these thunderstorms to start blowing up a little bit. And if we go to the visible satellite, you can definitely see that. But you can also see a little bit of shear starting to take these storms. You can kind of see, even though the low is moving south, you can see these storms kind of getting pulled off this way. So it's getting sheared a little bit. It's in a pocket where it's a little bit calmer with the wind shear. We'll get into that in a couple of maps or so. A little bit lighter shear right now, but of course that will definitely be increasing here as the storm continues to make its progression. But on the visible, you can really see where that rotation is. You can also see the blow up of thunderstorms near the center, which probably prompted them to name this Arlene. The more organized concentration of thunderstorms. It's so nice to see these storms. That's why I love hurricane season. You get to look at the storms, you get to track them. It's nice when they're not like devastating anybody, or anywhere. But you can definitely see it's very cool to look at these storms on the satellite. You can really see on the visible. It really shows better those thunderstorms that have recently started blowing up over the last couple of hours or so. So that, I think, is what that and the hurricane hunters finding those stronger winds of about 40 miles an hour prompted the Hurricane Center to, of course, name the storm Arlene. And it was organized enough to not name it subtropical, which makes sense because the waters are very warm. And you can see the dry air. There's a little bit surrounding the system, but overall around it, it's not too bad. The Western Gulf definitely has some Saharan air, some Saharan dust, but the Eastern Gulf is it's better, and we'll definitely be encountering some as it moves south. That's another thing that'll be working against us a little bit. But again, I say this, I pretty much had this the past couple of like hurricane season videos, which we'll be doing another update. I believe it's our 5th update. We'll be doing pretty soon on that because there's some changes to the hurricane season outlook that we'll definitely get into. But I say this every time, the dry air is really like low. Like this is June, like we should still be seeing Saharan dust being pumped off the coast of Africa. Like this should be starting to slow down around July, August, but it's beginning of June and it's very light. Like honestly, if it wasn't for like the shear, like a storm could definitely move off of Africa or like a wave and definitely form into something if it wasn't for the wind shear, because the other two factors pretty much check off here. Look at the Caribbean right now, pretty light. Like the northwestern Atlantic right here, again, pretty light on the Saharan dust, which is another thing that inhibits activity. So that's definitely something to be concerned about. But for this video, for a specific storm here for Arlene, yes, dry air is looking low, but will be increasing as it continues its trek to the south. Here's the wind shear. Here's what I was talking about. The trough looks a little bit weaker than expected here. You can kind of see it coming down here. You can see it's a little bit broken up. It's not like a steady stream of like high shear, but there is definitely still a lot, and it will be encountering that as it moves to the south. So it's got maybe a few more hours, if that, to strengthen. And actually, let me see how fast it was moving. Yeah, so it's moving to the south. I actually don't know if we have, me refresh their website, if we have like a speed on that. 5 miles an hour. So it's moving pretty slow. So that actually could be something that works for the system here because it's actually a marginally favorable environment right now. And the fact that it's only moving 5 miles an hour, which means it will stay in that marginally favorable environment for longer because it's moving slower. Yeah, but once it exits out of this zone right here and gets like into this zone down here near like the Gulf Stream, shear will go up a lot, dry air will go up a little bit, and the sea surface temperatures will go up a little bit. But those other two factors kind of cancel that out. So yeah, definitely a more short-lived system. Maybe like it's got like another day or two left before it like dissipates into complete nothing. But there is still, this definitely is, a telling sign of, the fact that this was still able to develop, this early in the hurricane season. And it is that time where they form, but it is also El Nino. Remember that we're getting really close, if not pretty much officially in an El Nino at this point, which is typically reduces the tropical activity. So this is still an impressive feat nonetheless. And of course, minor impacts will be felt maybe near like Cancun, maybe like Havana, Cuba, maybe like the coastline, western coastline of Florida. Some very minor and indirect impacts. But if we take a look here at the Hurricane Hunter path, you can kind of see where some of these drop signs, they definitely did focus on the center and the thunderstorms on the northeast of the center, which is pretty wise. If we take a look here, you can see, yeah, they even found pressure as low as like 1,000 millibars flat near the center there, and some flight level. Now, again, this is not measuring surface wind, but this is measuring the winds at the flight level that they fly at, which I believe is about 10, 20,000 feet. It definitely depends on the flight, because sometimes they like take a higher flight to look at like the clouds, and sometimes they'll like go into the storm. Usually it's about, I believe, about 10, 20,000 feet or so. Again, depending on the flight. And you can see, yeah, they picked up winds of about 50 knots at their flight level, which at the surface, if we take a look at this blue line at the top right represents surface winds. We're about 35 miles an hour, which is about what you need for a tropical storm. And actually before this, they picked up winds, I think, of about 40 knots at the surface. So, yeah, that was definitely a telling sign there of a tropical storm forming. And you can see here, here's the center. So when they flew into the center at about 1643 here, right? So you can see about 1,002 millibars of pressure. And then, so that's when the winds really dropped off, which makes sense. And then once they flew out of there and got to that stronger side of the storm, the wind shot up to their strongest level, in fact. So that's a telling sign that the storm is at least somewhat organized. And I think that was, again, another thing that they took into consideration as well. You can see the flight level winds, of course, dropped when they got into the center, which is, of course, something you want to see with tropical, how organized it is for a tropical storm. You can see the rainfall rates also did shoot up a little bit when the wind shot up too, which means definitely flew into some more organized thunderstorms. So again, all these things, and what I'm telling you is like kind of like what their thought process was when they were looking into these maps. Again, just another position update of where the low is. You see it's at about 86.5 degrees west and about 27-ish degrees north. But again, it's only moving south at about 5 miles an hour, so it's going to take a little while before, maybe again a day or two before it even like gets even anywhere near Cuba. If we take a look at some of the model track guidance, going to get into like the model portion of this video now. Kind of like when I do these coverage videos, typically the first half of my maps or my tabs that are open is usually like tracking the system and its current conditions, and then of course like the second half of the video is more geared towards like the modeling. And you can see it kind of moving south, and some models, again, they have it taking 48 hours to get to Cuba because of how fast it's moving. Like in 24 hours, it's only going to move from like here to here. And the models seem to agree on that. So that's not very far. Right? But eventually we'll speed up. Obviously, like 2 days after it gets to Cuba, it's going to be all the way out here. So we'll track again. But if it gets in between those straits, in between Florida and Cuba, if the wind shear is not as high as expected, maybe something could come of this. In the future, maybe if the wind shear weakens when it gets out in the more open waters of the Atlantic. But for right now, I think this is as good as it's going to get for right now. But of course, time will always tell. If we take a look here at some GEFS model tracks, of course, I'll give everything a refresh here to see if there's any new updates. Does not look like it on the GEFS either. But you can see most models seem to agree between 1,000 and 1,005 millibars of pressure, and that will go up as the storm will weaken as it moves off to the south and then turning east and then turning to the northeast. Right, so you can see there's the track that the GEFS has, pretty much agreeing with those other models. GEPS, really, they just kind of have the storm dying out. They just have it moving due south and pretty much just have it dying out after that. So really not much to be seen of the storm again. But again, they also agree on a somewhat of the track and the pressure being about between 1,000 and 1,005 millibars. Now, the intensity guidance, of course, this was made before. That's why it's called Tropical Depression 2L still. This was made before it became a tropical storm status. But yeah, tropical storm, it'll probably be above here once they do an update. But yeah, pretty much going to be dying out from there and not getting any stronger. That definitely is correct. And if we take a look now at the model portion here of the video, some more models here, the GFS model, you can see the storm moving to the south and then again turning to the northeast, but you can see it weaken right there. I mean, even on the vortice scale, you can kind of see it just weaken. Really not much of it left. The NAM3K model, a little bit bullish on the pressure, but you can see the rain field. It will, again, as it runs into dry air, as I told you earlier, amount of thunderstorms will definitely start to condense and shrink somewhat. All right, if we take a look here at the wind shear currently with the GFS model, you can see, again, kind of like with the map from the Weather Channel here, you can see right here kind of showed the same thing. Strong shear here, like in this zone, strong here in this zone, and somewhat, moderately high in this zone. But again, once it moves to the south, that trough will start to get its act together a little bit more. And you can see, yeah, it really starts to fill in. And you can really see all that wind shear. That's just going to completely topple the system over. It's not doing too well right now, but it's already going to be, it's just ruined. And if you look now for the next 5 days where the storm will be in this zone, you can see even the wind shear is higher than what it's supposed to be this time of year. You can see the anomalies here are higher than normal by about 10 to 30 knots or so. So pretty far above average. But shear out here, interestingly enough, where we typically see development later in the year, is actually 10 to 30 knots below average. That's an interesting thing to be looking out for the next couple of weeks. Granted, maybe we get some moisture there, could see some development. Something to watch out for. But on the HWRF model, you can see they actually predicted this pretty well. And they're pretty good at forecasting the strength of systems. You can see there's tropical storm force winds are on the north side. They have it getting to about 45 mile-an-hour winds, aka 40 knots or so. And pressure about 999.9 or just 1,000 millibars, which again is pretty accurate considering where we're at right now. And then they have the storm gliding to the south. Again, it takes about 2 days to get to Cuba, around Havana, and it pretty much gets kicked out off the coast of Florida and the Bahamas and out to sea. Pretty much nothing left to speak of it again. If we look at the vortice scale on the HWRF model, you can see still holding itself together a little bit, but then kind of just really dies out. You wouldn't look at this and be like, oh, that's a tropical storm. Like right now, you look at it, it's like, okay, we see some higher vortice values, but once it gets south, those darker colors start to weaken. And the storm really just starts to kind of dissipate a little bit. Even once it gets out to the Atlantic, it does not get much better. And if we look at the simulated, on the HWR, if we look at the simulated satellite, you can see here's that blow up of thunderstorms that we saw earlier today. Kind of predicted that pretty well as well. Considering this was made this morning. And you can see once it just falls to the south, I mean, yeah, there's pretty much no convection left of it. It's just going to be a swirl at this point because that dry air, like I said before, that's what the NAM agree with this as well. The dry air is just going to take over. But the fact that this developed early, like I said, this is a telltale sign for what the rest of the season could be like. So definitely stay tuned for more updates. Of course, some minor indirect impacts from Arlene, maybe some higher waves for like Florida, Cuba, the Yucatan, maybe some more moisture influence, maybe some more thunderstorms than usual, but very, very minor impacts with this system. But definitely stay tuned for potential future storms. And of course, my next hurricane season video, I believe it's the 5th one that will be coming out, that will be talking about the update that has been made to hurricane season and what the rest of the season could be like. So thank you guys very much for watching. I'm the Weather Dude signing off. Till next time, I'll catch you guys in the next video.